Hey, good morning. Hey, how's it going, everybody? What's up, what's up? I'm alright, how are you? Just making my coffee. What are you guys doing? Anything interesting? Doing well, nice, excellent. I'm running out of everything, but I'm going out of town, so if replacing it seems stupid. Let's go, coffee, let's go. It's currently 12:02 p.m. for you. Wow, where are you? You know what? I'm not gonna be getting her for the time being. It's kind of a long story. Kind of a long story. Sydney. Oh, it's already 12 p.m. there, so you're like a full day and change ahead of us? Because it's 7 in the morning here. So for it to be noon for you, you're definitely not 4 hours ahead, right? Or 5 hours ahead. So you're like 29 hours ahead? Is that right? Are you 29 hours ahead? 10 a.m. Yeah, it's 10 a.m. in New York. I'm in the office, so no audio, but hi. Hey. That's crazy. Wow, that's a long time. So you're already finishing. So is it Friday for you? Because it's Wednesday here, so I guess it's noon on Thursday for you? That's wild. Time is wild, y'all. My brain doesn't know what to do with it. Huh. Weird. It's Thursday for you still. Okay. So it's noon on Thursday for you. Huh. Very interesting. Very interesting. Morning. Hey, Anya. Hey, Rosie. My cousin is flying in today for the week. I'm so excited. Oh, that's awesome. Very fun. Very, very fun. Oh, I'm sitting down. Do you guys have any fun plans for the week while your cousin is there? Any fun stuff at all? Oh my goodness. I am TIRED. Disney a lot, Universal Sunday. Oh, cool. I find that Universal, I don't know. I'm not super into it, but I guess it would be fun to go like one time with someone from out of town. Skittles joined. What? All right. I'm a little chilly, but we're gonna read. I want to know how people put like a little thing right here. Like, wouldn't it be cute if I just had the book right here? My mom just downloaded the first book on her Kindle. She's gonna read Listen on her walks. Aw, that's so sweet. It'll be fun. It's a really fun book. It's a really fun book. All right, chapter 4, the principal's office. What did Connor do? We're about to find out. Connor had only been sitting outside the principal's office for 10 minutes, but it felt like 2 hours. The mystery of why he was there was picking at his psyche like a pair of hungry buzzards. He'd been surprisingly good student this year, not as great as his sister perhaps, but good nevertheless. Connor's grades were decent, although he probably could have done better in science and math, as he imagined most students could. Besides occasionally forgetting which revolution happened where, he was doing very well in history class too. And for the first time in his life, he was actually enjoying assignments in his English class. He was confident that he hadn't done anything wrong, so why was he there? He grew paranoid that someone had possibly framed him. Was he being held responsible for the graffiti on the lockers or the goldfish put in the faculty toilets? Sure, Connor thought that those pranks were hilarious, but he hadn't done them. If he didn't think he was guilty, did they think he knew who was and wanted him to testify? Could he plead the fifth in school? Did he have the right to a lawyer or a phone call? The door to the principal's office opened and a girl ran out in tears. Connor instantly tensed. Mr. Bailey? Mrs. Peters called from inside her office. Connor gulped. Hearing her call out his name was just as terrifying today as it had been when she taught him in the 6th grade. A huge promotion was the last thing she had expected, but Mrs. Peters had recently come up in the world. After 25 long years of teaching, Mrs. Peters had made the tough decision to retire. The subject had been on the veterans educator mind for some time. Unbeknownst to her student, Mrs. Peters kept a calendar at her desk for years and marked down the days until she was eligible. She often daydreamed about her life after teaching. She planned all the exotic vacations she wanted to take. She made a list of all the small fixes in her condo that she'd finally have the time to make. She assembled everything she needed to start a vegetable garden in her small yard. In other words, she was more than ready. But in the final weeks leading up to the conclusion of her teaching career, Mrs. Peters received the offer to become a principal. As appealing as a life of gardening and relaxation was, a life as principal gave her the essence of what she loved most about being a teacher: authority over impressionable youngsters. Needless to say, she didn't hesitate to take the job. She thrived in the powerful position of administering punishment, and occasionally something would come up that would allow her to do what she loved more than anything, which is why she called Connor Bailey into her office. "Have a seat," Mrs. Peters ordered. Connor sat across from her so obediently that he reminded himself of Buster, but he didn't expect to be rewarded with a biscuit. His eyes wandered around the room, and he noticed Mrs. Peters decorated her office in the same patterns and floral prints as the dresses she wore. "Do you know why I've called you in here today?" Mrs. Peters asked. She wasn't even looking at him. Her eyes were busy scanning through a stack of papers in her hands. "Not a clue," Connor said. He could almost see what the papers were in the reflection of her glasses. "I wanted to talk to you about the writing you've been doing in your English class," she said, finally making eye contact. Connor realized the papers she was going through were in his handwriting, and he panicked. "Is this about my essay for To Kill a Mockingbird?" he asked. "I know I wrote one. One of the saddest parts of this book is naming a girl Scout, but I talked to Mrs. York about my approach, and But I talked to Mrs. York about my approach and understand why it could have been better." Mrs. Peters' eyes squinted and her brow flexed in a judgmental manner. This was bound to happen at least once when she was in the same room as Connor. "Or maybe is it about my report on Animal Farm?" Connor said. I know I said that I wish George Orwell had used something to represent politics that didn't give me a major craving for a bacon cheeseburger, but that's really how I felt, so I wasn't trying to be funny." "She came to work with you? Oh my goodness, Haley, that's crazy. The new dog came to work with you? Are they going to be okay?" "You're brave. I don't think I would do that. I think I would be too nervous around a kid with a new animal." "No, Mr. Bailey," Mrs. Peters said. "I called you to my office to talk about the creative writing you've been working on in Mrs. York's class." Oh, that's different. "Oh?" Connor asked. Creative writing was actually his favorite part of the class. "Well, how am I screwing that up?" "You're not," Mrs. Peters said. "It's fantastic." Connor's head jerked in disbelief. "Did you just say what I think you said?" Connor asked. I believe so," Mrs. Peters said, almost surprised as he was. Mrs. York was afraid your stories might have been plagiarized, so she sent them to me to look over, but they're unlike anything I've ever read. I assured her they appear very original to me. Connor was having difficulty processing it all. Mrs. Peters, of all people, was complimenting and defending him. So, I'm in here for a good thing? Connor asked. A very good thing, Mrs. Peters said. Your stories and perspectives on fairy tale characters are wonderful. I loved your stories about the charming dynasty searching for the long-lost brother and the evil queen's long-lost lover being trapped in her magic mirror, and Trix, the misbehaving fairy, and Trollbella, the homely troll princess, are such imaginative new characters. It's very impressive. Thank you, Connor said. Can I ask what inspired these stories? Mrs. Peters said. Connor gulped. He didn't know how to answer. Technically, he had used the class to write about his experiences, so the stories weren't necessarily creative writing. Was it considered lying even if he couldn't tell the truth? They just came to me, Connor said with a shrug. I can't really explain it. Mrs. Peters did something that Connor had never seen her do before. She smiled at him. I was hoping you would say that, Mrs. Peters said. She retrieved a folder from the inside of her desk. I took the liberty of looking at the student profile you filled at the beginning of the school year. I found it interesting that under future career aspirations, you simply wrote, something cool. Connor nodded. Yeah, I stand by that, he said. Well, unless you have the goal of becoming a professional snowman, is it safe to presume that you're open to suggestions? Mrs. Peters asked. Sure, Connor said. He still hadn't thought of any jobs that fit the description. Mr. Bailey, have you ever considered becoming a writer? Mrs. Peters said, if these stories are any indication, with time and practice, I think you may have what it takes. Although they were the only people in the room, Connor had to remind himself that she was talking to him. A writer? Connor asked. Me? The thought had never crossed his mind. His head instantly filled with doubts regarding the prospect, like white blood cells attacking his virus. Yes, you, Mrs. Peters said and pointed at him for further distinction. But aren't writers supposed to be like super smart? Connor asked. Don't they say things like, I concur, and I don't identify with the likes of this? Those kinds of people are writers, not me. They'd laugh at me if I tried to become one of them. Hey, Destiny, we're on Land of Stories Book 2. Mrs. Peters exhaled a small gust of air through her nose, which Connor remembered was her version of a laugh. Intelligence is not a competition, she said. There's plenty to go around, and there are many ways that it can be demonstrated. But anyone can write, right? Connor asked. I mean, that's why authors get judged so harshly, isn't it? Because technically anyone could do it if they want to. Well, just because anyone can do something just doesn't mean that everyone should, Mrs. Peters said. Besides, anyone with an internet connection feels like they have the credentials to critique or belittle anything these days. I suppose, Connor said. His defeated look said otherwise. What makes you think I'll be a good writer? My stories are so simple compared to the other ones out there, and I don't have a very good vocabulary, and I'm worthless without spell check. Mrs. Peters took off her glasses and massaged her eyes. Connor was still a challenging student to get through to. Having something worth telling and a passion to tell it are what make you a good writer, Mrs. Peters said. I can tell you how many times I've read novels or articles that use complicated words and witty wordplay to cover up the fact that they have absolutely no story to tell. A good story should be enjoyed, and sometimes simplicity can go a long way. Connor still wasn't sold on the idea yet. I just don't know if it's worth it for me. You don't have to decide right now, Mrs. Peters said. I'm only asking you to think about it. I would hate if somebody with your imagination graduated and didn't do something cool with it. She locked eyes with him, and another rare, small smile appeared on her face. I have two loves in my career, reprimanding and encouraging, Mrs. Peters went on. Thank you for letting me encourage today. I don't get many opportunities. No problem.
Connor said. It's nice to be in the other category for a change. Mrs. Peters put her glasses back on and handed Connor his stack of papers. He figured their meeting was over now and headed towards the door, relieved not to be in tears like his prior guest. I'm so proud of you, Connor, Mrs. Peters said as he reached for the door handle. You've come a long way from napping in class. All Connor could do was smirk sweetly at her. If you'd told him a year and a half ago that one day Mrs. Peters would become one of his greatest supporters or refer to him by his first name, he never would have believed it. Connor mulled things over as he walked home. His thoughts soared into the realm of possibilities, and he sank into the realm of uncertainty. Had Mrs. Peters gone mad, or was he, Connor Bailey, actually capable of becoming a writer one day? Could he actually make a career out of writing about the experiences he and his sister had had in the fairy tale world? Would anyone want to read his stories about Troll Bella and Trix, or the evil queen of the big bad wolf pack, or Jack and Goldilocks? Would those people mind if he wrote about them? If he ever saw her again, would Goldilocks beat the living daylights out of him for writing about the love triangle between her, Jack, and Red Riding Hood? Connor figured that people had been writing the same stories about them for centuries. Surely they wouldn't mind if he gave the world a little update here and there. But what about Alex? She had as much ownership over their experiences as he did. Would it bother her if he started sharing them with the world? Alex had always been one with the future, not him. Planning had always been her specialty. Connor always expected that she would grow up to be a doctor, or a lawyer, or even president. Unfortunately, he hadn't given his own future much thought, so any prospect seemed like a stretch. Connor realized that he wanted to get Alex's input on all of this, but he reached their house and he came to a halt. There was something there that he didn't expect to see. What's Bob doing here? Connor asked himself, recognizing the car parked outside their home. The front door flew open and before Connor could open it himself, Alex was standing on the other side, wide-eyed and white-faced. Finally, she said in relief. What's going on? Connor asked. Why is Bob here? He wanted to talk to us before Mom got home, Alex said. He knows that we know, and he wanted to ask us something, and I'm pretty sure I know what it is. What? Connor asked, completely oblivious. Just get inside, Alex told him. I think there's about to be a major development. Are you all thinking what I'm thinking? Oh no! Okay. Oh, I just read the title of the chapter. Oh no. Chapter 5, The Proposal. Alex and Connor hadn't looked like identical twins since they were 4 years old. It was around that age when Charlotte stopped dressing them in the same outfits every day and started letting them grow into their own unique features. But as they sat on the couch staring daggers at Bob with their arms crossed, it was once again hard to tell them apart. So, Bob said and shifted uncomfortably in a chair across from them. Your mom said she finally spilled the beans about us. It was brave of him to take the situation by the horns. She sure did, Connor said. Bob nodded pleasantly like it was good news. The twins didn't even blink. They were an intimidating pair. I apologize that those flowers came to the house. They were supposed to have gone to the hospital, Bob said. Yes, they should have, Alex said. Bob had done thousands of difficult surgeries over the course of his career, but he found being stared down by the children of the woman that he was dating to be the most stressful experience of his life. I understand why this is difficult information to process, Bob said, but it's still me, guys. I'm still the same Dr. Bob who you've had dinner with a dozen times. I'm the guy who takes you to see the movies your mom doesn't want you to see. I'm the same guy who brought you Buster. I just happen to be dating our mother. Connor asked. Nice try, but everything you list make the situation worse. We thought we knew you. Are you admitting that Buster was some sort of dowry, Bob? Alex asked. Alex, what's a dowry? Connor asked out of the side of his mouth, not breaking his stare at Bob. It's a settlement of sorts, Alex said. Like in ancient times, a man would promise a dozen camels or something in exchange for his daughter's hand in marriage. Gotcha, Connor said, diverting his full attention back to Bob. You don't think our mom is worth a dozen camels, Bob? One dog and you think the deal is sealed? definitely don't think the deal is sealed, Bob said. Yet. Alex and Connor narrowed their eyes in perfect unison. Bob reached inside his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The twins wondered what it was for a second, but only a second. Once they realized it was too small to hold anything but a ring, it dawned on them what it meant. "Oh my God," Alex said. "No way," Connor said. Bob looked down at the box with a smile. "You know, when my wife died 4 years ago, I never thought I would be happy again," he said. "I save lives every day, but for a long time I thought it would be impossible to save mine, and then along came your mom, and I learned I had been wrong." Alex and Connor looked at each other out of the corners of their eyes. They had never seen Bob get so sappy, but they still appreciated how honest he was being with them. "I know you've been seeing each other for a while, but this seems a little sudden," Alex said. "We only found out last night," Connor said. "In our minds, you guys have only been dating for 1 day. Are you sure you aren't rushing things?" The way he looked down at the ring, with loving eyes and a heartfelt smile, made it obvious that Bob had never been so sure about something in his life. "I've been around for a while, guys, and I've learned that things like this don't come around very often," Bob said. "Not taking this opportunity to ask your mother to be with me for the rest of my life would make me the biggest fool in the world." Bob opened the box and showed the twins the ring. Alex gasped. It was the most beautiful ring they had ever seen. It had a silver band with 2 large diamonds, one blue and the other pink. They could have sworn that they heard music playing while it twinkled in the light, but it was just in their heads. "It took me 1 month to find the perfect one," Bob said. "I knew that this ring was right as soon as I saw it. I thought the diamonds would remind her of the 2 of you. They're different shades of the same cut." Alex's eyes immediately watered after hearing this. Connor folded his arms a little tighter. "That's the most touching thing I've ever heard," Alex said between sniffles. "Stop making me like you again," Connor said, his brow furrowing. Bob sat up straight, happy their meeting was moving in a better direction. "I'm not trying to replace your dad, and I'm not asking to be your new one," he said. "But I am asking for your permission to ask your mother to marry me. I don't want to do this without your blessing." The twins couldn't believe it. They both felt like they were passengers on this ship, and now he was letting them be its captains. "We need a minute to think it over," Connor answered quickly. Before Alex knew it, her brother was dragging her into the kitchen. They stood there for a few moments in total silence, just staring at each other. "What are you thinking?" Alex asked. "I'm thinking this is uncomfortable," Alex said. "This is more uncomfortable than the time I walked in and you, Mom, talking about training bras." Alex rolled her eyes and peeked into the other room at Bob, making sure he couldn't hear them. "Honestly, Connor, I don't think we have any power over this. It was really nice of Bob to act like we're a part of the decision, but you just heard what he had to say when you heard what Mom said last night. I don't think any of this is going to stop either of them from being together." Connor sighed and ran his fingers through his hair. "You're right," Connor said. "But who knows if Mom is even going to say yes? Maybe she'll have reservations about it." "Reservations about what?" Alex asked. "She loves him, and he loves her. What's going to stop her?" Connor looked away from her, not wanting to say what he was thinking, but they were both thinking it. "Dad's dead, Connor," Alex said. "He's not coming back, no matter how much we want him to." It was hard for Alex to be so frank. Usually she'd let the adults in her life dish out the tough love, but since they were slowly disappearing, she had no choice but to serve it up herself. Connor knew she was speaking to herself as much as she was speaking to him. Alex had a talent for saying everything he didn't want to think. "I suppose Mom has given us so much over the years. Our blessing is the very least we could give her," Connor said. "Yes, it is," Alex said and nodded. "This is another big one. Hey, Jody." "Another big what?" Connor asked. "A big moment," Alex said and sighed. "We've had a lot of them." "Yeah, we have," he said. "You'd think we'd become immune to it by now." "Immune to life?" Alex asked. "Is anyone ever that lucky?" Connor grunted and put his hands on his hip. "Fine," he said. "He can marry Mom, but I'm still calling him Dr. Bob." The twins returned to the other room, and Bob anxiously stood and faced them. "Well?" he asked with bated breath. "The jury has spoken," Connor said. Alex and I have decided that you may ask our mom to marry you. Bob joyfully clapped his hands together and tears came to his eyes. Guys, you've made me the happiest man alive, Bob said. Thank you, and I promise to take care of her for the rest of my life. Buster barked and jumped up and down, joining in on the celebration. Well, when are you going to do it? Alex asked him. How about here, over dinner maybe? Bob said. I'll order food from her favorite restaurant and surprise her when she gets off work. When? Connor asked. The sooner the better, Bob said. I'm free next Thursday night. How about then? I have class in the afternoon, but I'll be home by 6. Alex said. Great, then it's settled, Bob said. I'll propose next week on Thursday night at 6 o'clock, and I'll ask a few of the nurses to keep your mom busy so she doesn't get home early and ruin the surprise. This is going to be terrific. The twins looked forward to it. Not the event itself, but a chance to see their mom happy again. Hey, Bob, Connor said, are you going to move in with us? Usually married people like to have live their lives with each other for the first couple months at least. That's a good question, Alex said. Where are we going to live? My house, Bob said and shrugged his shoulders. Before she died, my wife and I bought a big house not too far from here. We were thinking we were going to raise a family. It would be nice to finally fill up those rooms. Okay, Becca, good luck with all of that. We'll see you later. The twins looked around their small rental house. The thought of leaving it made them feel sad. It had unexpectedly become their home over the years. It'll be weird to move again, Alex said, but easy since we've never actually finished unpacking the last time. I've got a swimming pool, Bob said, trying to cheer up the twins. Connor's eyes grew big. Whoa, 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 he said. Bob, you could have saved yourself an entire afternoon if you had just started with swimming pool. Alex rolled her eyes. Bob let out a soft chuckle. Now, Mom, better say yes, or I'm going to be so disappointed, Connor said. Connor. That sounds fun, Becca. Thrilling. It was hard for the twins to focus on anything in the following week. The looming Thursday stood out like a bookmarked page in their future. The closer it got, the more anxious they became. Alex and Connor didn't know why they were so nervous. After all, they weren't asking anyone to marry them. But in a strange way, Bob was marrying them too. And as apprehensive as they were about it, the twins were starting to feel excited about Bob joining their family. Connor was really looking forward to having another man in the house. As much as he loved his mom and sister, he missed having someone else there who appreciated the comedy in a bodily function. He wrote a short story in his English class that week about a family of trolls whose mother was engaged to an ogre. It wasn't the most flattering depiction of any of them, but it was quite therapeutic for him. He drew little sketches in the margins of his paper. The troll children looked very much like him and his sister. The one based on Alex even had a headband in front of her horns. Alex found Connor working on the story one afternoon after school, and she'd never seen him look so devoted to something before. They know you're the alpha now. That's funny. What's this? Alex asked him. Oh, it's nothing, Connor said, a little embarrassed. He still hadn't talked to her about his meeting with Mrs. Peters. It's just some creative writing for English. That's nice. Wait, is that supposed to be me? Alex said, and he pointed to a sketch. It's okay, but I'm not calling him Dad. Yeah, that's exactly it. Well, not at all, Connor said. What would make you think that? Well, because it says, this is supposed to be Alex underneath it, she said, annoyed and offended. That's so rude, Connor. How old are you? Connor guiltily looked up at his sister. There's something I forgot to tell you, he said. I've sort of been writing about the two of us a lot in English class. What do you mean? Alex asked. Like about our adventures in the fairy tale world, he said. They've made for some great stories, and that's why Mrs. Peters called me into her office the other day. She really liked them and wants me to consider becoming a writer. She said I may have what it takes, whatever that is. He paused. Thoughts or concerns? Alex blinked twice. Well, I think that's a wonderful idea, she said, and Connor sighed with relief. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Well, I was worried you wouldn't want me spreading our business around, Connor said. You're kind of the co-owner of our experiences. On the contrary, she said, I think they should be told. We saw so many things and met so many people, it would be a waste to keep them to ourselves. Dad would be so proud. Connor smiled to himself. He hadn't thought about that. Really? He asked. You think so? Absolutely, Alex said. He'd be so happy the storyteller gene went on to one of us. I've always tried telling and retelling stories, but you're so much better at it than me. You're funny, and people like listening to you. Connor shrugged. Shucks, he said. But I'm not going to argue. He pulled out the stack of stories to share with her. This one's about Trix's trial, and this one's about Trollbella giving freedom in exchange for a kiss. Wish I could have forgotten about that one. This is my first one about the Kirby tree, but I was super paranoid that people would find out it was true, so I changed it to the Kirby giraffe. Doesn't make quite as much sense, but oh well, I'm learning. This is great, Connor. Really great. Connor grinned from ear to ear. He believed her much more than he believed Mrs. Peters. Her approval gave him the validation that he needed to believe in himself. Alex flipped through her brother's stories, and she smiled and laughed as she scanned through them, remembering the events they were based on. Oh dear, Alex said, looking up from the paper, a fresh thought behind her eyes. Bob, are we going to tell him? Are we going to tell him who Grandma and Dad really are? Connor couldn't answer. The thought hadn't crossed his mind either until now. How are they going to share their family's biggest secret with him? Should we tell him? Connor asked. Well, we probably should in case Grandma ever shows up with an elf or a fairy on our doorstep, Alex said. Connor looked off into the distance. Gosh, who are we? He said. What other family has problems like this? Most skeletons in the closet don't have wings. Imagine he'll have a lot of questions either way, Alex said. She let out a long sigh. But it's not like it's really relevant anymore. It may be pointless to tell him that we have ties to another dimension if we don't get to interact with it ever again. I guess we'll just have to play it by ear, Connor said. It may be a good excuse to have in our back pockets for a while when we get older. We could tell Bob that we're going to go to the fairy tale world and then, go to a party instead. Alex tilted her head and looked at him curiously. Why would we ever choose a party over the fairy tale world? Connor shook his head. Just for once, he wished his sister would think like a normal teenager. I keep forgetting you're an 80-year-old trapped in a 13-year-old body, he said. Never mind. The end of the week slowly arrived, and the twins woke up to a beautiful Thursday morning. They gave their mom extra long hugs before they left the house, causing her to raise a suspicious eyebrow at them as they headed to school. Alex and Connor felt like the days passed extra slowly. They glanced up at the clock every 5 minutes only to be disappointed that it hadn't changed much. As soon as school ended, Connor ran home and met Bob at the house to help prepare for the night. He cut the corners over his neighbor's lawn, and he was so careless that he nearly tripped over a lawn gnome. Alex was too antsy to enjoy her honors course or be sleepy on the train back. She just wanted the night to be perfect for her mom, and from the looks of things when Alex finally got home, it was going to be pretty close. The kitchen table had been covered with a silk cloth, and there were candles placed in the center. A bottle of champagne and a bottle of cider were on the table as well, begging to be opened for a celebration. The whole house smelled delicious, as Bob had picked up food from Charlotte's favorite Italian restaurant. He was dressed in a nice suit and tie, and he held the box tightly in his hand, afraid to let it go. Even Connor had dressed up and put on his best button-down shirt. Alex tried putting a bow on Buster's collar, but he wouldn't let her. The dog had been acting strange for a couple of days. He stayed seated by the front door and growled at it occasionally. The twins figured a new cat must have moved into the neighborhood, or maybe their jitters were just rubbing off on him. But aside from the dog, everything seemed to be going according to plan. Alex ran up to her bedroom and dressed in a skirt and nice headband. She came downstairs at 6:30 and joined Bob and Connor at the table. Mom should be here any minute, Connor said. Let's make this proposal quick, Bob. I'm starving. I'll do my best, Bob said. He kept looking down at the ring. As excited as the twins were, they knew it was nothing compared to what Bob was feeling. They couldn't wait for her to walk through the door and see them waiting for her. Alex hoped her mom wouldn't cry too much, because then she might start crying. Connor hoped Alex wouldn't start crying because then he might start crying, and there was no dust to blame on it. Unfortunately, Charlotte was running late, so the three of them were forced to wait. They waited and waited and waited some more. More than an hour had passed after the time she was supposed to be home. Should we call her? Connor asked. Maybe we should give her a ring to see where she is. Get it? Get it? No, don't, Alex said. She can't suspect a thing. After another hour, the twins' anticipation turned to anxiety. Bob decided to put the food away so it wouldn't go bad. Well, I guess Nurse Nancy is being very thorough, Bob chuckled. She's probably just making sure your mom doesn't get here too early. But the twins weren't laughing. The last time they'd waited this long for a parent, they'd lost one. I'm going to go ahead and give Nancy a call, Bob said after even more time had passed. He dialed his colleague at the children's hospital. Hello, Nancy? Yeah, hi, it's Bob. I'm here with the kids. Has Charlotte left yet? Alex and Connor leaned towards him. They could barely make out what Nancy was saying on the other line, but from what they could hear, she sounded surprised. She left 2 hours ago? Bob said into the phone. Are you sure? We haven't heard anything from her. Alex and Connor exchanged fearful looks. Something's wrong, Alex said. I can feel it. Something's happened. Mom is never late like this, Connor said, shaking his head. Okay, thank you, Nancy. I'll try calling her, Bob said and hung up the phone. He quickly dialed Charlotte's number. He didn't make eye contact with the twins, not wanting to add to their concern with his. Bob tried several times with no luck. She's not answering, guys, Bob said. Do you think that she spontaneously decided to run errands tonight? Alex, worried sick, burst into tears. We need to call the police, she said. The police wouldn't do anything unless she's been gone for 48 hours, Bob said. Let's not panic just yet. Connor jumped up from the table and paced around the room. There's got to be something that we could do, he said. I'm going to go on my bike and go looking for her, Alex said. I'll go with you, Connor announced. Nobody's going anywhere, Bob said calmly, although he knew the twins were just as stressed out as he was. We're trying to call the hospital and her phone. Let's wait a few more minutes in case she tries to call us back. Alex's tears began to flow faster. She was more worried, and it was impossible not to. The twins feared that their history, was repeating itself. Buster suddenly started a barking frenzy. He was staring intently at the front door, jumping and scratching at it, growling as loudly as he possibly could. The twins had never seen him like this before. Buster, what is it, boy? Bob said. Is someone at the... The doorbell rang. All of them, including the dog, completely froze. It rang twice before any of them moved. Who could it be at this hour? Bob asked and went to answer the door. The twins followed him into the doorway, and they almost wished he wouldn't answer it. Whatever or whoever it was too late to be anything good. Buster began barking and jumping fit. Buster, get down, boy, Bob told him. The dog backed away from the door and stood directly in front of the twins, protective of them. He was ready to pounce on something in an instant if he didn't like the looks of it. Was he sensing something that they couldn't? Bob looked back at the distressed twins. It's going to be all right, kids, he said calmly. Whatever happens, just know that it's going to be okay. Bob opened the door slowly, peeking out onto the porch. It seemed empty. Hello? He said. Still nothing there and no one to be found. Hello? Bob tried again. Is anyone out there? Seize him! In a split second, a dozen soldiers dressed in silver armor barged through the door. One slammed Bob hard against the wall. Alex screamed. Connor grabbed her arm and they tried to run to the other side of the house, but the soldiers formed a tight circle around them and Buster. Their swords were drawn and they held a heavy shield with a small glass slipper displayed on the outside of the crest. The twins recognized the soldiers immediately. They were from the Charming Kingdom, but what in the world were they doing here? Get your hands off me instantly, Bob yelled and shrugged the soldiers' restraint. Get away from those kids. Who are you people? We securely surrounded the twins, the soldiers closest to Alex said to the open front door. Bring in the fairy godmother. Alex and Connor looked at each other so fast they could have hurt their necks. Fairy godmother, they said in unison. Two other soldiers quickly charged into the house, led by none other than their grandmother. Grandma? The twins gasped together. They almost couldn't believe their eyes. She looked exactly the same as she did the last time they saw her. She was dressed in her long sky blue robes that sparkled like the sky. Her hair was styled up with a beautiful white flower in it. She raised her crystal wand authoritatively as she walked into the house, and the twins had never seen her look so worried. Oh, thank heavens, Grandma said. The soldiers parted their circle for her, and she threw her arms around Alex and Connor. You have no idea how happy I am to see you, Grandma said, hugging them so tightly that they felt like they'd pop. The twins didn't hug her back. They couldn't believe that they were seeing her in real life. Their heads were spinning with so many questions, but they only managed to spit out the basics. Grandma, Alex said, is it actually you? Where have you been? Connor said. Their grandma gently placed a hand on each of their faces. "I'm so sorry I've been gone for so long," she said sorrowfully. "I promise to explain everything later." She took a moment just to look at them through teary eyes. They knew that she had missed them as much as they missed her. "Just look at you two. You've grown a foot since the last time I saw you," Grandma said. Just then a familiar man walked through the front door. He had a distinguished jawline and wore a bright yellow suit. To Bob's amazement, the man's shoulders and his hair were actually on fire. The twin recognized him instantly. It was Xanthias, the only male fairy on the fairy council. "I checked around the property," Xanthus said. "It's clear." "Xanthus?" Alex said. "What's he doing here?" Bob fought relentlessly under the soldiers, pinning him to the wall. "What is going on?" he yelled. "Who are you people?" Grandma waved her wand in his direction. Xanthus pointed a few fingers at him, and the whole thing suddenly lit on fire. Both were ready to fight if necessary. "Do you know this man?" Xanthus asked the twins. "Yeah, that's Dr. Bob," Connor said. "Don't set him on fire. That's our mom's boyfriend." "Boyfriend?" Grandma said and lowered her wand. "Well, I must have been gone longer than I thought." "Release him," Xanthus ordered and lowered his hand. The soldiers immediately dropped his hold on Bob. "This woman is your grandmother?" Bob asked the twins. "Is she part of the circus or something? What's with all the tricks and costumes?" "I don't know if there's a circus," Xanthus said, unsure of whether he should take offense or not. Alex and Connor didn't know where to begin. "Bob, it's a long story. In a nutshell, our grandmother is Cinderella's fairy godmother from the fairy tale world," Connor said. "I know it's a lot to process, so take your time, but we promise that that's the only baggage our family has got." Bob's eyes grew bigger and he glanced at the soldiers and their grandmother and Xanthus. "Uh-huh," Bob said, not convinced. Their grandmother looked around the living room gravely concerned. "Where is your mother?" she asked. "We don't know," Connor said. "She was supposed to be home a few hours ago," Alex said. "Grandma, what's wrong?" Connor asked. "Do you know where Mom is?" Their grandmother didn't answer, staying deep in thought. "Grandma, what's happening?" Alex demanded. "We haven't seen you in over a year. Why have you shown up out of the blue? You have to tell us what's going on. Where is our mom?" Their grandma looked back and forth between them. "Children, what I'm about to tell you is going to seem very frightening," she said. "But I need you to be strong and trust that many qualified people are handling the situation." The twins nodded impatiently. Any news was better than no news. "I believe your mother has been kidnapped," their grandmother informed them. They were wrong. No news would have been much better than this. Crazy. Jeez. What the heck? Am I? Oh, yeah. Right, it felt like it for a second. I just was 2 chapters into it. So those are the 2 chapters we'll read for today. We'll definitely read more tomorrow morning and Friday. Not Saturday, but tomorrow and Friday. Or maybe... No. Never mind. I'll be on a plane at this time on Saturday. But I got a lot of work to get done today, so I'm going to get to it. And then I'm going to go get my nails done for Fancy Pants Party, which is tomorrow. It's true. So that's what's on the docket. You have a good day too, Amanda. I'll see you guys later. We'll have slime later.